So as a kid going through school now, I say, well, if the AI can do it better than me, what's the point of me doing it?
So, well, let's jump in. Tim, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
let's do it.
Before we get started, just maybe a quick little background on you. Who are you? What do you do?
Sure. My name's Tim, and I've been an international educator for a long time. So I've worked in Palestine, in China, in
Hmm.
South Korea, Washington, D.C., and currently in Amman, Jordan. So I've worked all over the world. Um, I run an initiative called Connected Classroom, which is a research open source initiative that focuses on AI and cognition and the effects that AI has on
Hmm.
students and thinking, dependency. Um, and I write a lot of articles, publications. Most of my work comes through Psychology Today. I have a book in peer review at MIT. It's called Unautomatable. It's
Hmm.
focused on the human capacities that we still need to develop regardless of how this technology progresses. So that's where I'm at. That's what I'm exploring currently.
No, I mean, it sounds like if you were to pick a domain to study with where technology is, the timing's perfect. Was that a coincidence, or did you sort of just see the writing on the wall and dive
It,
in?
uh, so I didn't use a large language model. My first exposure was actually in January 2025.
Wow.
It's the first time I ever used it. Uh, I've been pretty like anti-tech for a long time, right? Um, and when I used ChatGPT for the first time, and since then it's improved
Sure.
significantly, but I think it's maybe like the 3.0 model or something. And I was using it, I was asking it some questions about cognition that I was curious about, some medical
Hmm.
information. Um, and I noticed that it wasn't super accurate because I had some context and some background knowledge. And I was like, oh, this is interesting because I know people are using it in schools. I also observed a lot of colleagues using ChatGPT to do their work, but it wasn't really saving them a
Hmm.
lot of time. They had to edit it so much. So it got me interested, right? So I started to play around. I started to interrogate the machine per se, kind of learn about how these large language models worked. And it created interest where I was intersecting psychology, like human development, child
Hmm.
development, education, and artificial intelligence, and how these all came together. And I've been able to kind of pick on some interesting insights in how I think the integration of AI into schools, into the way we think, into universities, could have some positive and some negative effects on
Hmm.
civilization or how we learn and what makes things
Hmm.
meaningful.
Gosh, so interesting. I mean, right now, would you say you're optimistic? Are you in utopian or dystopian? If nothing changes and we stay on the correct, I think folks like you are trying. I don't speak for you, but I think you're trying to get ahead of the curve and ensure we don't go off the rails. So I fully appreciate folks like you and others. But if things stay on the current trajectory, good or bad, in 10 years?
Well, I think it's conditional,
Mm.
right? It's hard to predict intent, right? We don't know. So what I really look at is architecture, right? So there's the difference between intent and architecture. And what does the architecture currently allow for? Well, we can go both ways. It allows for some really positive use cases and it allows for some really
Mm.
dystopian ones. Um, it all depends on intent. It all depends on the intent of the companies. It depends on the intent of the governments. It depends on the intent of the user for whether or not this will be beneficial or not,
Yeah.
right? I think it's conditional on those things. And we can get into that more if you want, but
I think conditionals, I would 100% agree with you. I guess I would say, and let me know what you think about this. Charlie Munger said, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome, right? So the incentives of these current companies is what? Engagement, never get off our platform, keep them using it,
yeah.
get them the answer quickest. If I'm using Chat GPT, I do not want you to go to Claude. I do not want you to go to Gemini. And they're going to all start introducing ads, I guess maybe besides Anthropic, at least that's their current position.
Yeah, everyone else except Anthropic. It's actually that Claude's the only large language model I use at this point.
They seem to be the company that cares, about the alignment problem. Cares about the stuff we're talking about. Now, I'm not in the boardrooms of these other companies, but just
publicly it seems so, but also from their privacy policies, their terms, they're a lot better. But you never know. I mean, eventually these companies all have to make money, right? So you just mentioned ChatGPT and ads and ChatGPT and porn and ChatGPT and all this stuff. They're just whatever they can do to make a buck at this point, right? Because they're $1 trillion committed in infrastructure and contracts, right? So they're still what is $12 billion loss per year or quarter or something.
That's what scares me.
They have to make money, right? So when you have to make money, when that's the incentive, well, what's your intent? Well, it's probably to capture the way we think, our behavioral data, and influence it to make a buck. I mean,
100%.
I don't know if that's the case.
mean, it just is. Saying, I mean,
the writing is on the wall, right?
Yeah.
So all of this is always going to come back to intent, right? You can't predict all these things, but the architecture exists for what we just talked about to happen, right? Whether it does or not, we don't know.
Yeah. Well, I guess I will say I'm kind of dystopian in that regard. If you look at social media, right? I mean, Tristan Harris, I don't know if you saw the social dilemma. Was that the name of it? Yeah, it's fantastic, right? And he
during COVID
I mean, he introduced the infinite scroll, meaning we just want your eyeballs on the screen and we don't want you to turn away. And I think the data is coming in now that was not good for kids. I mean, the attention spans are like zero. I mean, I have a 10 and 12-year-old, so this is kind of near and dear to my heart now. Getting their eyeballs off YouTube Shorts is like you're just taking the dopamine, pump out of their back, and it's like, and it's real hard to have them work through a problem, think through, you call it cognitive offloading, or is that the right? Yeah. And that word is like, oh gosh, that's what I've been feeling again with my 12-year-old. Mostly it's my boy, my son, my daughter's 10. She doesn't seem to be as captured. Maybe it's a gender difference, maybe it's just her age, or maybe it's just different personality. But my son, I'm looking at him like, man, he does not have the ability to just work through a complex problem in his head like I had to as a kid. Like we just had to do because there was no way to get an answer. There was no Google. There was no anything. And I just think it looks like last night I was helping him with the paper, and and I'm in technology. Like I'm responsible for pulling in large language models to some of the stuff we do at work. So I see the immense value, and it's not going away. But I just see a hacking of an instant shortcut to get what you want to get into the answer you want to get to in the education system. And our kids are in a great school, no complaints there. They're trying their best, but I just don't know how they're going to. I guess going to the education system, obviously specifically this is right in your swim lane. I mean, how do you think the education system needs to respond here?
Well, you just brought up that Munger quote, right? What was it? Say it again.
Show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome.
Yeah, show the incentives. Okay, so the question is, well, what are the incentives of education, right? What's the incentives of the system currently? And oftentimes, not in every school, but most schools, the incentive is the product, right? Here's this product proves your competence, right? You hand this in, I understand it. And for a long time, this has worked because if I turned something in the 80s or the 90s, that would show that I had synthesized the information, that I was competent. It was a reflection. If it was competent work, it was a reflection of my own competence, right? So that education system, which was built on the acquisition and then the integration of knowledge, it's still the same thing. But now I have a tool that can do all that for me. So as a kid going through school now, I say, well, if the AI can do it better than me, what's the point of me doing it?
Right.
And if the school is still incentivizing, well, this is the rubric, this is how you get an A, right? all I need to do is see you do X, Y, and Z, and that's going to get you the A. Well, the AI can do it X, Y, and Z, can it? Why can't I just use that to get the A?
Right.
Right? If that's the
Right. If
incentive
A is the
system.
end, is
Yeah.
the bar. Yeah.
So I believe in education, the incentives have to change. What do we value? What are we looking at for students? And I think we kind of need to move from product to process. And I know that I don't think that's a innovative idea necessarily. I've heard a lot of educators talk to us, oh, well, how do you do that?
Mm.
How do you do that? It's more complex, right? Because we have a system that it's K to 12, and then the design, the incentive is also to get into university, right? So you can get a job, so you can be part of the workforce. It's all aligned, right? What kind of workers are people going to want 5 years from now? These things all connect. But overall, in education, we have an incentive issue, and if the incentives don't encourage kids to develop struggle or friction or thinking capacity, right? And they still incentivize final output. Well, why wouldn't I? I mean, I wouldn't blame the kid. Why wouldn't I? I used Spark Notes, right, in high school.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I would say there's still a difference because I still had to read the Spark Notes and I still had to mildly pretend I knew what I was talking about. And any other kid that used the Spark Notes had the same idea, right? So it was still a homogenization process. It's the same as AI.
Right.
So probably not that much different. So that's my big concern in education. If you wanted to talk about it on a civilization level,
yeah.
If everyone's using the same tool, we're all homogenizing our own thoughts and having the exact same opinions, right? We're having the AI has synthesized the act of thinking for each of us individually.
Right.
So what's the difference?
Right.
What do I bring?
Yeah, and I think I asked you a question in the notes, because I go back and say, okay, is this just another technological revolution, a big one, right? It's a step function, but is this no different than, you go back, okay, we didn't have first we didn't have libraries and books, then we had a place to go, we had all this information, okay, but then we had a way to just sit in front of our computer and ask a question, and Google gave us all the references, so now I don't have to go anywhere, and I can get information at my fingertips. And then I say, well, what's the difference now between this? Okay, the next step is large language models, and I in some ways it's just another evolution, but in some ways it's very different because to your example, with Google would just give me all the information that I still had to piece it together, make a coherent, reference those sources, and then articulate my position given all those sources. Now we're at a point where the neural nets are really doing what the brain kind of was meant to do anyway. So it's the first time, and that's not even to say now AIs are creating other AI. So this is, and to say exponential is almost doing it an understatement. So I feel like up to this point, technology was helping us, but we still had to do the thinking. We still had to aggregate. We still had to form.
Yeah, it was helping us learn better. It was enabling us to have more capacity, like more integration of knowledge. I would say what you just said, what you just spelled out, is the difference between retrieval and synthesis, right? Like if I go to an encyclopedia or I go to the library or I read a book, what I'm doing is I'm retrieving information. And I still one that's doing the synthesis, right? And the synthesis isn't just of knowledge, it's also of my cultural background, of my previous experiences, of my personal belief system, of my other expertise. Like whatever exists in the schemata that's already been built in my brain, when I retrieve a new piece of information, I'm bringing it in and I'm synthesizing it and I'm making sense of it in my own unique way. Large language models do that for you.
Right.
So you ask for retrieval, right? And people use like ChatGPT as a search engine. They ask the same question you type into Google search, except it doesn't give you the link. It gives you the answer, but it gives you the AI synthesized answer, which is actually just a statistical average, right? You've lost the act of synthesizing that information in your own brain.
In your unique way.
Like I said about homogenization, everyone else that did the same thing is thinking the same way. So I do think it's a lot different. Same with calculators, right? I've heard this
Right.
one.
Right. Right.
Well, I've heard this example a lot. Well, it's like, well, why can't I just use a calculator? Like, what's the problem with that? I mean, I use a calculator. I'm not going to do anything over double digit, even addition. I'm
Right.
not
Right.
going to
Right.
do it
Right.
in my head anymore. But I do know. I mean, I know how, but I'm not going to do it in my head anymore. But there is a difference, I think, because I can give an example. Um, I know the function to input. So if I'm doing, I don't know, 425 times 60, like I understand the function. I understand why I'm doing it. The only thing I'm offloading in this situation, right, is the act of
Right.
computing. But let's just say, and I'm going to use this example because I don't think a lot of people would know the answer to this. But let's just say I had a question like, what's the difference between a magnitude 7 earthquake and a magnitude 5
Mm.
earthquake, right? Well, it doesn't sound like it's that big of a difference.
Right.
But can I use a calculator to help me? I can if I know the
Right.
logarithm, right? And if I were to put that question into ChatGPT, it would give me the answer. But me, I don't understand anything about seismology or
Right.
seismology or whatever. I don't understand anything about it. So when I read that response, I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's a lot bigger, right? But if I was a professional in that field, I would know that it's actually 100 times bigger. It's the difference between me having to evacuate the city of 100,000 people and doing
Right.
nothing and not even being able
Right.
to feel it, right? That's the difference, and that's what you can't offload. I mean, for everyone. I mean, does it matter if I know that? Does it matter if I know the logarithmic function of that? Me personally, no, it doesn't. But it does matter for the people making those decisions. So if you have a generation where people can't make those decisions or audit that output for accuracy, and we do know, obviously, that AI is not 100% accurate, you can't rely on a machine that's not 100% accurate to make decisions that affect other people's
Mm.
lives. And that's the difference between the AI and a calculator.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's, and the reality is, it's not going to slow down. It's going to accelerate exponentially, and then some. And you're right. The incentives stay as if you know. And I'm also worried that we're just going to lose a generation of intellectually curious people. I'm going to get the answer, then move on. I get the answer and I can go back and play. I can get my quick A and go back to do what I want to do. Where, I mean, I remember being, having that feeling in school too. Oh, I just want to go out, ride my bike or whatever. But you had to chug
Yeah.
through the stuff because there was going to be an F waiting for you if you didn't. So yeah. So if and that's what I'm wondering, how the school, like, again, my son's 12. When he's in college 6-ish years from now, what are the, I almost think it's better that we got some time before my kids will go to college. But for folks that are in college right now, I feel like they're going to enter a world where the colleges didn't, the education system didn't have time to adjust, if they do at all. It's just optimistically, let's say they adjust, and they're going to enter a world. I don't know what they're going to land. I mean, and maybe it's just one of those things where we have to adapt, and we're going to have to. Some folks are going to have to learn the hard way that the world they enter out of college is just going to be very different. But yeah, I do.
Yeah, sure.
I am a little. I am. I don't know. I'm not optimistic in that regard, because I do think the incentives.
Well, I have a 2-year-old
Okay, we got some
daughter,
time.
and I'm not even sure what the value proposition of university is
Yeah,
going to be 16 years
exactly.
from now. I really don't. Um, unless it changes. I mean, for certain universities, there'll probably be some value proposition still, but if you factor in cost and what you're getting out of it, I have no idea what higher education will look like
Right.
15 years from now. I
Yeah, I
honestly have
think. I mean,
zero
it's kind of a
idea.
blessing in disguise in that case, because you have time. So right, but if you're in college now
Yeah,
or a few years out, I think that tipping point is going to be right happening. So that scares me a bit.
yeah.
But yeah, so I'm not. I mean, so what do you do? Like, like you referenced the work you do. So what specifically are you working on? Like, what did you call it? I'm sorry, you sent me what's the name of your website?
So I've got 2 initiatives going. I have Connected
That's the one.
Classroom, which is focused on the intersection between like AI and cognition. And then I have the Cognitive Privacy Project, which is focused on the the mental self-determination to cognitive privacy, right? I think it's a developmental necessity. It's also related to education, but it's also expanded into ensuring that we have a definition for what data privacy looks like in 2026. And it's not the same as uh, my location or my social security number or my credit card number. Um, Tools can collect behavioral data now, right? And this creates the infrastructure where companies or tools can start to infer behavioral outcomes, which means they can start to influence behavioral outcomes, right? Through algorithms. So you can already see it. I mean, you said your kids watch YouTube. I actually had to I turned off YouTube recommendations for this very reason, because depending on the location I am, right? Like I can give a funny example because I live in Amman. I have this off. Go back to the US. I know we said we weren't going to get into politics or anything, but I'm a 35-year-old man, right? I'm a 35-year-old guy. So I go back to the US. I open up YouTube, wanted to watch some basketball highlights or something. And what do I see? I see Joe Rogan podcast, right? Got no problem with Joe Rogan. I've listened to his podcast before. But I'm a 35-year-old man. The algorithm's like, well, Tim, he might click on this. Let's see if he does. Okay, well, once you click on that, now the algorithm's going to see what else you're going to click on. And it might start offering you things that are maybe a little more conservative or a little more
conspiracy
conspiratorial.
Theory. Right.
And then you click on that, right? And soon you're going down this rabbit hole where the algorithm's feeding you content that 35-year-old men, right? Or then I'll see some stuff about women or something, right? Like, women do X, Y, and Z. How stupid is that, right? In the US, this is what I see every time I go back because of my age and profile, right? So this is happening on Instagram, it's happening on TikTok, it's happening on YouTube, where the algorithm is essentially trying to influence my behavior. And then you brought up like ads earlier. Well, how does this start to work when I've collected enough behavioral data to know, well, Tim really likes shoes. How do I get him to buy these shoes without him even and make him think that he's making this decision for himself? Right. This is where I'm deeply concerned about my right to cognitive privacy. I don't think a company should have access to my behavioral data to influence the way that I think.
But I mean, that is literally the model of big tech today. I mean, that's right.
But I understand that it is the model. And I do think that there should be laws in place to prevent that specific type of behavioral profiling.
Is there any progress there?
No.
So, yeah, I thought that was the answer, but I guess the answer is folks like you and others doing exactly what you're doing and putting energy and effort and and thought behind countering where things are going. Because I mean, yeah, because again, the incentives, right? They're just with your example. The more they can get ahead of your buying behaviors or purchasing behavior, your eyes on the screen, then they're just going to make more dollars because the ads are running based on your how many hours or minutes you're looking at certain things, and so the incentives are truly pulling us into the wrong direction. So, and I mentioned capitalism in here, and I think you maybe touched on a little bit, but in other countries, you when you gave me a little profile earlier, you see the delta between the U.S. and others. So you're seeing different economic structures. So do you see do you see that big difference in other countries versus, you just gave an example. You went back to the US and you instantly felt targeted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, dependency is universal, right? So when you talk about AI tools, like there was a study that came out a few months ago, looking at students in China and Pakistan, right? And I may get these statistics wrong, but I believe it was close to 70% of those students that engaged with large language models over a certain period of time developed laziness, right? And about 30% had a significant decrease in the loss of their decision-making capacity. These studies have been confirmed also in the West, right? There's been a lot of studies out of the UK, and Common Sense Media has done a lot of work. Michael Gerlich has done a lot of work on AI and cognition and critical thinking in the US. And essentially, no matter where you look globally, excessive use or reliance on AI tools causes a measurable decline in thinking. Right? It's not like regionally dependent. Right. It's just, this is just what happens to people.
Right.
It's what it's showing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, like, oh, it took 10 years to figure out that social media was bad for kids. Well, hopefully it doesn't take 10 years to figure out that offloading your thinking is bad for development, right? Hopefully it doesn't take 10 years to finally prove that. I mean, you brought up capitalism. The incentives there are obviously increase efficiency and make more money, increase margins, and AI has the potential maybe to do that, right? You look at other countries. I mean, I don't want to speak too much to other countries, right? I mean, I've lived in a lot of places, but everyone has their own models and what they value. I think in China, just from a collective social standpoint, like their focus isn't nearly as much on the large language models as it is on embedding artificial intelligence into everything. I don't want to make any assumptions, but I wonder how they're going to ensure that it benefits their socialist system. Is it going to benefit everyone, right? Robotics are a huge thing there, and it's super efficient. So a lot of people have been employed in factories. Well, what happens to those people when robots are just doing everything? I'm not sure how they're going to tackle that as they increase efficiency, whether there'll be a spread of the wealth. I can assume that in the US that won't be the case. And the top will get more efficient and more wealthy, and at the expense of working class people. Yeah, so that's hard. I mean, it's hard to compare countries and systems. I can only look at it from the lens of human development. I think anytime you offload your judgment or decision-making capacity, it's bad for that country.
But taking the other side, just play devil's advocate. If
sure.
you, because even Elon's working on Neuralink. So now, in I don't know how many years, but soon enough, we're not going to even have to speak to a large language model or type anything in. We're just going to have a thought, and then I'm going to access the large language models. I'm going to be accessing these data centers just for my thoughts. That's not really that far fetched. They're already doing pieces of that already. So if you just extrapolate this all the way out, I mean, it's almost like the human brain will just atrophy to not having to do much of anything. And I guess does critical thinking and, again, longer term, does that just become more of an art? And hey, just like, in 10 years, I don't think anyone's going to be driving, say. Okay. So, but people that like to drive, there'll be racetracks. They'll be able to get on in a car and actually drive the car because it's more of a thing they want to do. But just going to the store and getting a gallon of milk, I don't want to. I just want to hit a button. The car comes and gets me. I go get it, or it delivers it to me. So almost like that becomes just a kind of a commodity that I don't have to worry about doing unless I want to, and it becomes an art. Oh, I want to go drive today, and it's a big deal. It's like,
I mean, that makes some sense. Yeah, thinking could become an art, like
right. That's kind of what I was thinking. Right. I think I put that in the notes. It's almost like, well, if I just want the answer, well, I'm going to get the answers in 0.3 milliseconds. But because I don't have to do it anymore. But if I want to go into a room with a bunch of deep thinkers, now I'm intentionally going and I'm becoming more of a philosopher and critically thinking through things but I don't have to survive anymore. We're entering a society of abundance, and it's no longer required to be smarter.
Sure.
Right? If you are really smart, you're going to, you have more economical means by just at your disposal, typically.
Sure. So let me ask you a
Yeah.
question though, right? Where do these questions that you'd be asking Neuralink or these large language models come from? Like, how does one develop a good question that needs answering?
Hmm.
And over time, if you lose the ability to think, you lose the ability to
Mm.
question. So, what I'm trying to retrieve from this would be, again, it's just the statistical average. The variance disappears entirely, and you have a system that innovation just kind of flat out stalls. With no variance, there can
Mm.
be no innovation. I'm concerned that as we start to kind of offload more and more to AI, right? You have this regression to the mean. I've brought
Mm.
this up before. And even from the systems themselves, right? Like what made a large language model valuable in the first place? Well, what made it valuable was it's trained on human expert data. It's trained on human data, right, from hundreds or thousands of years. And that's why it's valuable. But now, over 50% of the internet is already AI generated.
Mm.
So the models now are training on themselves.
That's a good point.
They're
Yeah.
training on their own output. So picture that snake eating itself.
Right. Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
that image, right?
Yeah.
So over time, right, you have AI models that are training on their own output, and then they're training on their own output again. Right. Now, I would say, like, is the statistical average, is it higher than it is today? Probably, right? Because the content that it's analyzing is of, let's just call it what the companies say, PhD
Mm.
level, right? So is the PhD level average better than current humanity average? Probably. But where does it cap out? And how useful, right, when you start to cannibalize yourself, how useful do you become in terms of that variance, the
Mm.
innovation, right? Where does it come? What you described earlier made me think of Wally.
Oh, great
You
movie.
remember
Great
that
movie. Yeah.
movie
Yeah.
at
Great
the
movie.
end,
Disturbing.
where all the
Yeah.
people are just kind of carting around in the
Yep.
thing, drinking the same thing, having the same thoughts. Their bodies completely
Right.
atrophied. Their minds completely
Mm.
atrophied. I mean, what you're describing is that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an outcome that we as people want? Would that increase corporate profits or profits of a few people? Sure, it would. Is it beneficial for humanity as a whole? Probably
Mm-mm.
not. Right. So it's hard to predict that future.
Yeah. The Wally example that
Um,
always comes up, and I love it and hate it because I love that movie before AI was even a thing. I mean, that's another, they were so far
yeah,
ahead of the time. I mean, it's still, that's crazy, man.
I know. I need to
Yeah,
rewatch
same
it.
here. I actually haven't watched it in a while, but I think I feel like I've rewatched it in my head because every time I have these conversations, people bring up, "Hey, remember Wally?" Like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah." Um,
Oh, that's. I mean, I think that's what we
yeah.
picture. I mean, that's when you just offload
Mm.
everything. I think it also, from a security standpoint, that's why I say it's bad for all countries. It introduces this single point of failure, right? Like the earthquake example
Yeah.
I gave you. If there's no one to audit that output, we've just assumed that the machine can do it. If it's wrong, you've introduced a failure based on the system, and it's a single point. It's no different than if everyone's self-driving through GPSs, right? And I get lost in the woods and my GPS goes down. I don't know what to do. I'm just lost in the woods, right? That's a single point of
Yeah.
failure. Um, we we as a country or as people need to be cautious about having an entire generation grow up reliant on
Mm.
this. and taking themselves out of the decision-making loop. I think it's a crisis in the
Mm.
making. And that's why education really needs to focus on, I would say we could probably focus less on content and more on developing thinking skills or higher order thinking skills, where you naturally develop expertise in content, right? As you grow those capacities. Um, but the focus should really be less on the final
Mm.
product and more
The
on the thinking
process.
process of how we get
Yeah.
there, right? So,
Yeah, well, you just nailed it. I had an example that I was watching a TED talk, after I sent you the notes this morning. And, one of his ideas was, if you look at, and he gave a great example of, he quoted someone, Sean Godek, Goedeck. It was a brilliant quote. He used an analogy like in UI development. He was a UX developer, so his whole job was, as a software job, to make the UIs, user friendly, and we all love that, right? The iPhone is so popular because it's just so intuitive. You just know what to do, and they did a fantastic job there. But he gave a really good example of an unfortunate result of some of these UI designers is what they call a dark pattern, right? And we've all sort of fell into this, but maybe we don't know what it's called. In other words, if I'm going to say, and he gave an example of, you're trying to check out, say you're trying to bring your family to the zoo, and there's a big, they're always looking for donations. So they have a big, green button that says check out and donate, right? And the big green button is what you would think, because it's pointing right. And there's another button that's pointing left that says check out without donating. And it's a button that's not very sexy, and it looks like it's going backwards. So by default, you click the green button that's just in your face saying, check out and donate. Now it's only like $1 or 30 cents or something, right? But that was a pattern, what they call a dark pattern, that just it was when they do all the A/B testing, all the users say, yeah, that looks better. Let's do that one. But they use that pattern to basically force your workflow through the tool. Well, so they're basically forcing the end result without, they're manipulating where you go through the tool, right? So okay, same, Amazon spends millions trying to figure out, how can I add to cart? Can I buy now? All the magic they do for the frictionless purchasing, right? All that stuff. Anyway, so he gave that as an example, and then brought the corollary to, the large language models. And he said, what did he say? Sycophancy is the first large language model dark pattern. So the large language model is basically telling you, great idea, Tim. That's exactly how you should be thinking. You're thinking right along the same lines. Continue thinking that way, and you want more recommendations. So, the dark patterns are now, evolving with the large language models, and I guarantee you, half of us don't even know that it's happening, and so that scares me. Then you add ads to that, and it's like, man, we're just going to be hacked, without even knowing it. And folks like you and I are just generally having these conversations because we're maybe weird. We enjoy this type of stuff, but the average person, I'm worried about that. I mean, again, I see my son using it. I'm like, hey, bud, how did, okay, you got the answer there, but right. And this was literally happened last night. So it's a very, timely conversation. And I'm like, well, he was doing, I forgot the bibliography on some Christian missionary or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but you just wrote down what it told you, but like, and he had to give references to where he got the information, and they're allowed to use online resources. But I'm like, are you allowed to use ChatGPT? And I was like, well, yeah, but I'm like, okay. Like, and it just got into this weird, I got the answer, plug it in, let me go back to YouTube. And I know I'm kind of rehashing that,
sure.
but anyway, I think those dark patterns are going to start evolving. And the incentives are just to keep you clicking, keep you on the platform. I don't know what we do here.
Well, yeah, let's get super dystopian with that. So, have you heard of prompt injection?
Yeah. Like, well, yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, it's like a nefarious method where, let's say I have a PDF. It's like my company, and in white text or little tiny fine print, I write a little prompt. So if you were to put that in AI, right, it would override your prompt, and it would do what I want you to do, right? So if this person uses AI for a peer review summary, right? And actually, some researchers from MIT did this to prove it with their report. And everyone was just, no one actually read it. They just all threw it into ChatGPT, and they all got like, oh, this is a great research. You should definitely put it for peer review, all this stuff, right? And that's a little prompt injection. So when algorithms run or dictate kind of our engagement and the way we think, right? We talked earlier, we're going to get into politics. We talked about democracy. Let's talk about elections, right? So during the last few election cycles, we've had issues of misinformation from both sides, right? How do you influence people? Well, you make shit up, you lie, you influence them with misinformation or misdirection. With these new AI algorithms that are so advanced at collecting behavioral data, you can influence or manipulate the direction that people start thinking, so that they start believing that their opinions are their own. And in the next few election cycles, we'll be seeing instances of cognitive prompt injection, where if you know how the algorithm engages, right? And companies have already figured it out. Like, what types of things does your son watch? Like, what's fed to him, right? Well, if you feed that stuff to him with just a little something extra,
right. Oh boy,
right? It's hard to find the attribution for that, right? So even if let's say I'm Russian and I want to influence a bunch of 12-year-olds, right? And they love watching videos of gamers, right? The way I frame that content could just be a little bit different, because the algorithm's going to push that for engagement. And as long as it gets engagement, it's not really looking at if there's any kind of injection to influence the way someone thinks or their opinion. Do I have evidence of this? Not like explicitly, but I think we can see in social media the types of things that you see are often to influence you to behave a certain way or to think about a policy or a situation a certain way, right? So when I say a single point of failure, there can be a situation in the future where you have a country or a bad actor that wants to influence a mass amount of people to think about something a specific way. They no longer need misinformation. They just need to figure out how the algorithm works, what engages people, and how that works, and then start an influence campaign that way. And that's the danger of homogenization, right? That's the danger of a generation growing up offloading, is you lose the capacity to audit output. You lose the capacity to understand what's happening to you. And I think it's our responsibility as parents or teachers or educators to make it clear that this can happen. And you, as a human being, are responsible. You have agency, right? You have responsibility to ensure that you are the decision maker in this loop, in this feedback loop. I mean, it's obviously complicated.
Yeah. Auditing output. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that, because that is a really good way to just
steal it.
Summarize what we should be doing from now on is not, auditing the output, regardless of how you get it. But again, that takes cognitive skills, and it takes time, and there's energy, and there's friction there, because I got to do work, and I'm tired, and I'm exhausted, and I don't want to do it. Yeah. But I think you're right. And the frustrating part too is there's a lot of different solutions that I read about, you just preparing for this, that all the companies could be working on, but I don't think they're going to be incentivized to do it. And the guy was, TED Talk I was listening to gave a few examples. Like today, the large language models they just give you the answer. They give you what you want as quickly as you can, right? And as quickly as they can, which is, in nanoseconds. Now, I could just take that answer, like you're saying, without any, to use your term, without any auditing of the output, and run with it, write it down on my homework, and I'm good to go. Another thing they could do, and they've experienced with this, and the usability and the user feedback is like, I don't want it. The next thing they could do is they could, instead of just giving the answer, ask for clarifying questions, lead you down the path of that that reasoning. So it's helping you, but it's also forcing you to rationalize and to think through, what you want to ask next. And it gives you more leading questions that you then have to answer. Right. And then the other example he gave is, it would be, and these are in order of, least friction to most friction. Like, least friction is what we all want by default.
Mm-hmm.
We're all lazy just by nature. And that's what they are today. The clarifying, phase was a little bit more friction, but then he went to the most resistance. And what he would say, and maybe what we're saying would be the best for society, was almost like the LLMs give you almost like homework assignments. Like, okay, I see what you're asking. Maybe try reading this, an article. Give me a summary of it and why and then maybe another question. So the large language models are almost just, while they can do what they're doing today, right? And maybe Anthropic will maybe lead the charge with this, or some other nonprofit maybe, but they could actually bake this stuff in, right? So they're forcing, but again, the incentives are not there. If you give me 5 large language models, one gives me the rapid, perfect answer in a sycophantic way, and you give me these other large language models that are forcing me to go jump through hoops and 10x the time to get my answer, I'm not optimistic that people will choose the latter. They're going to choose the first one.
Yeah. So I think you just hit on, like, if we want to get into the positives for a second.
Please, yeah.
You hit on what's the you just hit on it. And this is what education could be doing. So again, I'll go back to this concept of intent versus architecture. Yes, these models could do that, right? And what you're referring to is kind of a dialogic or Socratic questioning model,
right? Yep.
Right? They could do that, but they won't, because the majority of people aren't actually like going to be engaged by that, right? And you have to think about all of these users. What's the best way to move forward with all of them? However, that agency that you just described of answering questions is something that could deliberately be taught in education. And I'm going to give an example, because one of the things that I think AI is super useful for is processing of information. It's processing of text or code. I mean, you said you were a software developer. I mean, you obviously know about code, right? I don't. So this is a perfect example. If you were to use Claude Opus to code something, like, you would obviously know what was going on, right?
Yep.
And I code a lot of education apps with logic built on pedagogy, and I understand the logic, but I actually have no idea what the code is doing, right? I just know that I'm trying to make sure it's built on the pedagogy or the logic so it's constrained within those ideas. But I never studied that. So on Connected Classroom, I've built out an entire dashboard with 6 educational apps that you can use for free, right? I don't know how to code, right? So this has allowed me to do something that I wouldn't have been able to do before. And I think there's a huge benefit in having a tool that can do that. But students can learn this. Like what you just said, you've used the word a few times, friction. So let's just say I am giving a student an assignment on, like, fiscal or monetary policy. It's like a high school course. And I want to know, like, what your opinions on it are, and can you support those with some evidence, right? Just a typical thing. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to use ChatGPT. I'm going to put in a good prompt. It takes 3 minutes. I get it. I spend some time editing it, right, to make it look like, I thought about it, submit it in. The other student, right, is taught that they can use friction, right? So they, instead of saying, I'm just going to put this prompt into ChatGPT, they flip it. They have ChatGPT ask them questions. So you're saying that companies could do this by design, but we also, as human beings, can do this by design. I actually use this all the time. I flip the script. It's dialogic learning. You say something like, can you ask me 10 questions that would help me think about what I really think about this topic.
Mm.
And in this situation about fiscal policy, right, this student may be like, oh, well, in 2008, my dad lost his job, right, in the recession. And we were never able to recover from that. And then I was in college at the time and it affected my job
Mm.
prospects. And by answering these questions from the AI is generating the text, but it's a wildly different output because that output
Mm.
is synthesized through the human knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So one student hands in a completely generic essay that every other kid that used ChatGPT had. And then the student that used that method where they created friction still had ChatGPT generate the text, but the text is uniquely human. It's uniquely from their own
Mm.
experience. It's a wildly different essay. And if you're talking about expertise and how experts can use AI to enhance what they can do, if they have the AI question
Mm.
them, because we have things like context, we have struggle, right? We have expertise, we have lived experience. There's a lot of things human beings have
Right.
that AI doesn't have access to. And by sharing those things, you create something
Right.
original, even if the text is processed by the large language model. It's the same as a
Right. Right. Right.
calculator, right?
Yeah.
I know the function, it computes the answer. I give it the information, not through a prompt. Can you fix this? Can you fix this? No, that's not what I meant. Can you fix this? I'm talking about raw human jagged
Mm.
edges. Let the AI process that, and you'll get something entirely unique to you.
That's a really good point. So yeah, that's a good point. And I guess yeah, it's a good way to look at it because we do have the ability to control how much how personally we take an individual responsibility and agency. No matter what these companies are doing, we still could. I mean, and I'm a big believer of individual. Like we do. I always say to my
Yeah.
family, whatever happens to you is mostly your fault. Mostly. Like yeah, you could be, God forbid, cancer. There's things you could be born in the wrong country. Yeah, I get that. But generally speaking, whatever you're in is mostly your fault. Own your circumstances. And, in that vein, I think that's a great point that listeners should hear is that you could control whether or not this AI revolution takes you on the wrong path or the right path. And I think that, again, it's going to take energy, right? And it's going to take a little bit more effort, but blindly just getting the fast answer is not the only way to use these things. Although that's the easiest path. I like that. What did you call it? Dialogic learning. Dialogic
Yeah.
learning. I like that. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned struggle too. I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you look at just the human species, I mean, gosh, we've been through a lot. But the struggle we've gone through was out of necessity. We didn't choose it, right? You were born 100 years ago,
Yeah.
which is not a lot of time in the timeline of humans, and whether or not you ate was optional. I mean, you might not eat for 4 or 5 days, depending on where you were living. And now it's our biggest problem is eating too much, at least in this country, in the U.S. Right? It's like just
Well, isn't the struggle what led to the innovation and the
oh
improvement
yeah, yeah.
of
What do
humanity
you say?
over
The best
time?
innovator is innovation's born out of necessity or something like that, whatever the quote is.
Yeah.
But yeah, right. When you have no other choice, you'll innovate
Yeah.
your way out
So
of it. Yeah.
if there's no friction, where's the innovation? And if we, I mean, okay, so there's two ways to look at it. You know, I'm gonna just bring this guy up. I don't know if you know him. I think it was like 2 election cycles. Do you remember Andrew
Oh yeah,
Yang?
yeah, 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 yeah. Yep, yep.
Yeah. So this guy was so ahead of his time. I was thinking about him the other day because people used to make fun of him. Why is he always talking about truckers? Why is he always talking about this? This guy was basically saying, well, like, we're going to increase the efficiency, right, through automation. And like, truck driving is a really difficult job, right? It's really stressful on the body. You have to have a lot of concentration. It can be unsafe. It could be unsafe for the driver and other people. Like at some point, the roads are going to be filled with trucks that are
Mm-hmm.
robots. They're going to go from place A to place Z. Well, what's going to happen to all those people? Shouldn't we be considering something like a universal
Mm-hmm.
basic income? Right? These companies have increased their efficiency. They don't have to pay these people. these trucks can work day and night 24/7, right? Shouldn't we be considering, well, how does this benefit all people? Well, if I don't have a job, and this, I'm just applying this to
Right.
anything now, all of the efficiency cannot be funneled
To
to
the
a few
top. Yeah.
companies, while other people don't have a means to engage or live. And I know the argument against that is, well, there'll be new types of jobs, right? Which is probably true, right? There'll be
In many
new types
cases,
of
yeah,
jobs.
but not all. I mean, some will be
Yeah,
completely
but
lost.
not
Yeah.
all.
Right.
Yeah. So if we really want to increase efficiency, and AI is that solution. I don't know if it is, right? I don't actually know of any evidence yet that's showing that companies that have integrated AI have like drastically increased their efficiency.
Mm. You
Most
hear
of
a lot
it's
of claims,
come
but
from
I
just,
do think there's a lot of leaning forward in those claims. I mean, it's
I think there's a lot of
yeah.
speculation, but not a lot of evidence that it's actually happened. But let's just
Mm.
say it does. Um, well, who benefits from that increased efficiency, or are we kind of back in this, I, what's the term? It's like a Jevons paradox. It's like the 18th, 19th century industrial revolution. People thought, oh, well, now that we're burning all this coal, like think about how much more energy we're going to have. We're going to be so much more efficient. People are going to have to work less. What ended up happening was there was all this extra efficiency and people worked more
Right.
because now we can make
Right.
more
Right. Right.
money.
Right.
It's the same with AI, right? It's, well, are we going to get to work less to produce the same output? That sounds like a pretty good gig to me, right? If the company can get the same value from me and I get to use AI and I produce the same value for the company, but I only have to work 2 hours a day, that seems like a fair exchange. But is that going to happen, or am I going to be expected to produce 4 times what I produce now?
Probably the latter. Yeah, because
Probably, right?
because the goalposts will just
So I
move.
think
The profits will just 10x.
it'll just
Right.
move. It's
Right.
every iteration, every generation has been like, oh, this new technology is gonna let us not have to work as much, right? This has been a promise
Right.
for a long time. Oh, we're not gonna have to work as hard because this technology can do it for us. But in order to keep a job, companies are going to expect more from
Right.
you. They're not going to expect
Right.
less.
The entire bar is going to be raised. Right.
So
that is human nature, though.
yeah,
I mean, that is. You're right. I wish I could.
I mean, this is what this is why the intersection of psychology is so important when you talk about
Anything
AI,
really. Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
anything, right? Every single thing in life can probably be looked at through the lens of psychology or economics.
Yeah. 100%.
It's hard to remove either of those two from anything that's happened in human history, right? Including this. So, regardless of promises that are being made, or the benefits or the negatives of certain technologies, right? We're still contending with human psychology, and we're still contending with an economic structure that incentivizes X, Y, and Z.
Right.
I mean, it's changed over time, but whatever those incentives are, that's what the technology is used for.
Right. Yeah. I made the case. I think I make it once every 4 or 5 podcasts that if you just look at human nature, that's really like, so to your, it's greed and right. I mean, again, and to your example, if companies, if I can now use a tool and get, do 2 hours of work and get 8 or 10 hours of productivity out, wow, quality of life goes up. But you would think. But however, greed sets in, and I'm like, well, now I can get 10x the productivity. So now instead of you doing 10 hours of work for 2 hours, I want 20 hours of work for 10 hours because you can do 2x or whatever it is. So the bar just keeps raising.
Yeah.
And then we just keep chasing our tail. The goalposts keep moving. The dollar value in the bank accounts is never enough. We keep chasing this invisible thing, and we all die of heart attacks at whatever, 59 years old, whatever it is. But and again, I know that's more, we're going back negative again, but I just, and then you look at the bigger picture. The other thing we didn't really talk about is, and I am in the defense world. But if you look at the nations and the adversaries in our there is a race there's a race there. If we slow down in any way, the U.S., okay, well, China's gonna win the AI race, and then we're all screwed, right? So that's also the complication that sort of in my circles that the U.S. will never slow down because of that, because the other countries aren't going to do it. It's like the next.
Sure, and that's why it's like the nuclear arms race.
Yeah.
And that's why there's no regulation, right? And there won't be any regulation until something really bad happens.
Yeah.
This conversation is really interesting. If we really talked about things on like a civilization level. And oftentimes when I have these conversations, they end up going down this dark path.
You want to end with something positive? Please, let's do it. I do want
to share this really interesting example because we talked about it earlier. It's like, well, what's the value of humans? And at one point, questioning came up, right? And I was reading about this a few days ago. So there was this question, I think about 50, 60 years ago. I know some Nobel laureates were either won or they were the ones that developed this question. But essentially, they wondered, well, why does like protein folding happen so quickly in nature? And for 50 years, no one's been able to solve this question. Like there was never any technology to actually be able to calculate how this stuff works. Because this is significant for the development of certain kind of medications or technologies for health. And up until AI came around, there was nothing that could possibly process what nature does so efficiently. And then you have some people from Google, I think it's called
DeepMind. Yeah, that's the team that cracked it. Yep.
Yeah, this AlphaFold, and they cracked it, and now AI just does this. And you think, well, that's really interesting because for a human to process protein folding, right, when you think of it from like an exponential mathematical level, it's impossible to do, right? And even a computer to do it, and that's what people have tried and failed, would take such a massive amount of computational power. And AI comes along, and this question that humans have posed for the last 50 years is all of a sudden solved. And now it's used to help develop different products and medications, I believe, right? So, well, that's really interesting, but that question came from people. It came from experts that only were able to ask that question because they had synthesized their content knowledge so deeply and understood the world that they were a part of so deeply that they could ask that question in the first place. Right. So that's where the value of humans will always be in those fringe cases, right? The statistical outliers. That's how progress is made. And you have to cultivate that kind of thinking through struggle, through synthesis, through the practice of collaborative communication, through the process of like analyzing or evaluating things on your own, right? I'm not saying that like AI can do that. AI can analyze data more efficiently than I can. I do know how to do it, right? So at this point, if I were to ask AI to analyze this spreadsheet, right, which is an objective thing, it's not like it's giving me its opinion, it's just analyzing data. I think that's a pretty good use of cognitive offloading. Same with if I have it write code. I think that's a pretty good use of offloading. I don't actually know how to do that. It saves me a ton of time that I don't have to learn how to do that coding, right? But I'm still directing it based on my pedagogical expertise in how humans learn, right? So without that, it would just be a generic application that AI came up with. Right. So I do think the word I'd want to use is augmentation. Right. The process of synthesis must remain human, but AI can process things 100 times faster than we can. Why not utilize it for that? As long as we remain in control of the decision
Right.
loop and in control of the judgment.
Yeah, it's almost like selective cognitive offloading is what we should be focused on, and understanding when to offload and when to not. That would be ideal.
Which
That's
is
complicated. Yeah,
but yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, and I do know, I've been listening to podcasts about this very topic, and again, kind of wrapping up with a positive note, the AIs are starting to ask questions about the universe and then solving them that some of our best physicists didn't even know to ask, and they're thinking, oh gosh, if that's how a black hole truly works behind, whatever it is behind the event horizon, then that must mean time. And they're starting to ask questions and create new mathematics, which, again, if you apply that to the medical field, hopefully the cancer cure is closer than we think, all those things that hopefully come out of it that hope, that I think, we do want, and we don't want to slow down. But yeah, it is going to be, I think we're there's a fine line, I think, between this where we go here. But I think conversations like this help, right? Bringing it to people's attention, and they don't blindly just dive into the race to the bottom of the brainstem. I think Tristan Harris called it when he invented the infinite scrolling, because dopamine is a powerful thing, and man, it's in our bodies for a reason, right? It was supposed to reward, or the anticipation of a reward to motivate you to survive, but now I just have it by looking at a thing. And man, it's or getting a quick answer. We are getting hacked. But
Awesome.
All right, Tim, thank you so much, man. Have a great rest of your day.
All right,
man.
Yeah, you too.
Appreciate the conversation.
Bye-bye.